Hello, my name is Joshua Leeds. I'm a music producer, sound researcher, and the author of books on therapeutic music and sound. I'm also the creator of this series, Music Matters. I felt it was important for us to ignite or be in the conversation of the relevance of music and sound during times of cultural disruption. The episode that we're going to see this evening is entitled The Culture Becomes the Patient, and it's all about the relevance of music and sound and what it is that we can do beyond entertainment as a force for social cohesion and healing. The first episode of the Music Matters series is entitled Why Soundwork Research Matters, and it explores the groundbreaking 2019 research that began under the auspices of world-renowned singer Renee Fleming in conjunction with the National Institutes of Health and the National Endowment for the Arts. The NIH and the NEA contributed well over $20 million for 15-plus research studies about music and neuroscience. These studies are designed to conclude in 2022, 23, and 24. In the second half of this episode, I invited musicians, educators, and policymakers to take advantage of this science-based research to help them to get music, specially created music, into schools, into hospitals, and into community centers around our nation. The third segment, Public Music, explores music returning to its roots as a community endeavor, bringing inspiration, social cohesion, and hope during challenging times. All right, let's go. Recently, COVID-19, global warming, economic disparities, and unresolved and significant social justice issues have convulsed our country and the world. It's caused me to wonder, what is the role of music and musicians in cultures in times of this kind of change and disruption and stress? One could argue that we are on the precipice or already deep in multiple inflection points. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not making the case that we are facing Armageddon. However, I'm reminded of the time in my parents' generation. In a mere 27 years between 1918 and 1945, just referencing our recent history. During that time, there was a pandemic that took over 150 million lives around the world. It also brought on World War I, a very severe depression, and World War II. One could say that 27 years was a pretty miserable time. And yet, for those who survived from 1946 on, they flourished, and our country flourished. And so, I'm not making the case that we are on the edge of extinction, although some people do think that global warming is that bad. I don't know, but what I do know is we're in quite a mess. So, what do we know? We know that change brings discomfort, especially when the change is thrust upon us and it's not our choice. And when you add in uncertainty, it's really a recipe for a lot of freaking out. So, be it local or be it nationally or globally, one could say that we're living in some stressed times. We have a lot of change and we have a lot of uncertainty going on. Whether or not it's beneath the surface or not, foreboding seems to affect a culture in the same way as it affects an individual. We never seem to really let down, to relax, to just chill out. Unlike COVID, which was dramatically global, the lineup of stressors seems to be local now. Be it in a state or in a town. They feel it now, while we breathe a sigh of relief that we have somehow dodged that particular bullet, be it a flood or a riot. But we all know that that school board fiasco or that abortion crisis is not long coming to our own neighborhood. We will have that fiasco and that crisis. And that's what I'm talking about, the foreboding, the sense that not all is well, and what is happening over there is going to happen over here too. Out of these cascading issues and global and local waves of change and uncertainty, one could say that the culture is becoming a patient, an entity that needs to be looked after and cared for in the same way we would an ailing brother or sister or friend. It's like someone who is continuously awoken from deep sleep. They never get down into the juiciest part of the delta sleep cycle. And consequently, when this happens, people become on edge and their tolerances become diminished. Does this sound familiar? Could we say that our cultures are on edge and that tolerances are deeply diminished? So the question arises, how do we use music when we have an ailing culture? Does our culture need a lullaby or a marching band or both? Does it need a rock concert or does it need choirs out on the street? Or both? Does it need classical virtuosos at Carnegie Hall or thousands of kids learning to play their favorite instruments and bringing them home? Or both? Our global culture is unwell. It's as if we're at war with ourselves, at war with our own environment. Maybe it's like a forest fire that is sometimes necessary to open up the terrain. I don't know. But what I do know is that music has got great psychological imprints. Maybe this is one of the reasons why there's been so much neurological study of music and the brain. Melody inspires. Harmony reminds us. Rhythm unites. Tone resonates. And patterns assure us. They comfort us. Historically, music is a cohesive balm. It brings optimism, distraction, but more importantly, solidarity, inner joy, hope. I read somewhere that music does not cure a pandemic, but it certainly cheers the soul. Therapeutic musicians, like musicians everywhere, are trained to read an audience and create an effect. While there is a great difference between bar and bedside musicians, they both bring good intention and musical surcease. But if a community is hurting, what can music do? Most of us don't know what to do with a patient the size of a neighborhood, let alone a town or a country. Here are some examples of some recent musical endeavors to trigger your imagination. Homebound Italian musicians spontaneously appeared on Milan balconies during severe 2020 COVID isolation. The Black String Triage Ensemble is, quote, committed to using music as the healing force for the soul in the immediate aftermath of community violence. unquote. They play concerts for the community at the scene of an incident. Estonian singers in 1987 took on the Soviet Union in a singing revolution, quote, so named because Baltz identified songs as the unifying symbol and nonviolent weapon of choice in the struggle for national self-determination. The Pavarotti Music Center in Bosnia opened in 1997 after a devastating war because they understood the importance of non-professional music directly in homes and neighborhoods. In 2022, the Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra, made up of both refugees who fled the war and artists who stayed behind, tours the world to keep attention on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. A musician says as he joins, quote, I don't have a gun, but I have my cello, unquote. Dayvin Hallmon, the creator and conductor of the Black String Triage Ensemble, speaks about the use of music and art, quote, to address pain, foster healing, promote love, call for justice, and guard against hopelessness. So now the consideration turns to the question, what are the skill sets that you need as a musician, whether therapeutically trained or not, to go out and be the most effective sonic communicator you can be to a culture that's ailing? There's an old term called woodshedding. I believe that it comes from either early rock and roll or maybe even earlier than that with the blues. Woodshedding was you go out ostensibly behind the woodshed and practice, so you didn't have to do it in front of other people. You'd practice and practice and practice. You would woodshed, you would learn. And so the question is, what is the woodshedding that you, as an aspiring sonic activist, as a musician who is looking to be as effective as you can, going out into a culture that is ailing? One last thought about all of this. We become so self-identified with our instruments. Oh, I sing, therefore I'm my voice. I'm a violin player, therefore I relate only through the violin. Oh, I'm a guitar player, I'm a tuba player, I'm a harpist. But the fact is, you're not your harp, you're not your tuba, you're not your violin. It is the essence of who you are that is coming through your instrument. And you may need to take that violin or tuba or guitar, and you may need to set it aside for a while and pick up a different musical skill to be able to serve what is being called for now. What do we need to know about technology, psychology, culture, fear, uncertainty, or change? Everybody can use inspiration, and certainly everybody can use hope. In closing, I suggest that musicians and budding sonic activists sharpen their skill set, learn a new trick, put it in your bag, and get on out there. What do you need to do to move out of the concert hall or the hospital room, out onto the streets and into the community centers? It's not one or the other, it's both. Learning as an adult is great. So the third session of Music Matters is entitled Public Music, and we will delve deeper into this idea. Thanks everybody for taking your time, your valuable time, and spending it with me. I wish you all well. Take good care.